So what we're going to be doing here is trying to catch up on some of the news and other things that happened while I was on my trip. I'm going to be honest, so yesterday we did come back from Whistler. I am now home, and I ended up making the post-game video, Vancouver versus Ottawa, a really interesting win for the Canucks. But after that video was made, kind of had a weird night. You see, I was trying to watch a movie, trying to catch up on Smile 2, because I needed to see that, but I was so tired. I ended up passing out at like 10 p.m. and waking up later in the night at 1 a.m. So, yeah, I kind of got a few hours of sleep there. Was not able to fall asleep afterwards. I was actually planning to sleep through the entire night and just start making today's show on the 24th sometime after I woke up, but because I woke up way too early and was unable to fall asleep, I ended up just staying up and finishing Smile, and now it's the dead of the night. It is 6 a.m. and I am out here talking about the Montreal Canadiens, because there was an article published earlier in the week that I wanted to dive into here. It was on the fourthperiod.com from November 22nd, so really right when I started my trip the other day. It goes over the Montreal Canadiens and how they are continuing to evaluate the trade market. And, of course, for a lot of Canadiens fans who have been paying attention to the team's status over the year, we recognize that trades are probably going to happen soon. There are guys that the team are probably going to find ways to get rid of. I think everybody's sort of floating around the same names, the Yoel Armias, the Savards, maybe if you wanted to be pushy about it, Mike Matheson, who really knows. But this article by David Pagnotta goes out there and talks a little bit more about some of the specifics here. Canadiens GM Kent Hughes and his staff did not expect to be last in the East at any point this season. And even with some injuries to kick off 24-25, the Habs appear to be disappointed in their overall performance to date. With Patrik Laine skating and Raphael Harvey-Pinard and Laval on a conditioning loan, Montreal's depth up front is about to get even deeper. The Habs have 5 forwards playing on expiring contracts, and Hughes could look to move one of them to help free up a roster spot in the coming weeks. Yoel Armia, Christian Dvorak, Jake Evans, Michael Pezzetta, and Lucas Condona are all set to becoming UFAs this summer, and among them, it appears Armia and Dvorak are unlikely to be brought back next season and are considered prime candidates to be dealt by the March 7th trade deadline. While word across the NHL is that Hughes is still manning the phones and engaged in various discussions with other clubs, a move going into Friday is not believed to be imminent. Montreal has recently been linked to teams such as Anaheim, Pittsburgh, LA, and Edmonton. The Canadiens also have defenseman David Savard in the final year of his 4-year contract, and he has also drawn interest from multiple teams this season. Savard comes with a $3.5 million cap hit and does not own any no-trade protection. Dvorak, however, has an 18 no-trade list as part of his contract. And so that's the article. I'm going to leave a link in the description if you wanted to go out there and read more of it yourself. But diving into some of these ideas here, it is intriguing to me how Yoel Armia and Christian Dvorak are called out as some of the guys that are probably going to find themselves on different teams next season. I don't think that's all too surprising when you consider the caliber of play that they provide and just kind of the role on the team, plus the fact that you have other guys that I think Canadiens fans would prefer seeing in more significant roles. I mean, if you just map everything out, assume Patrik Laine resigns. That's a really big assumption to make because he's probably going to make a lot of money, but assume Patrik Laine resigns. I think a lot of Canadiens fans would want a core of Slafkovsky, Caulfield, Dach, Suzuki, Demidov, and Laine. Those are 6 names, so you will have at least 1 or 2 guys forced into the bottom 6 there, whether it's a Brendan Gallagher or an Alex Newhook or anybody else that you could say is maybe a bit more talented in that. And Raphael Harvey-Pinard is still going to enter the fray. You still have other guys like Jake Evans that you do usually see value within. Long story short, the Canadiens have a bunch of dudes, and with the younger talent, the Demidovs, the Owen Becks, the Philip Mayshars, the Michael Hages of the world, you could expect the Montreal Canadiens to hopefully find themselves trade opportunities to free up those roster spots and allow those younger guys to break through. It might not happen right away, but you could always prepare for the future by making some sort of a deal now. The article said that there was probably not a trade happening from Montreal heading into Friday, and now it's Sunday. I guess we could go out there and give that little bit of an update. But talking about these teams here to dive into, let's talk about the Montreal Canadiens getting linked to Anaheim, Pittsburgh, LA, and Edmonton. I feel like for a bunch of these teams, there are some very obvious names that toss themselves out as ideas here. Anaheim, everybody was talking about Trevor Zegras in Montreal. In Pittsburgh, you could say there is some sort of a narrative with that team that they want to remain competitive while Sidney Crosby is still on the squad. So whether or not that means acquiring a middle-tier, depth-ish option like an Armia or a Savard or whomever else, especially if the team is going to trade away a guy like Marcus Pettersson, you kind of need that defenseman to step back in and replace the minutes. For LA, there are some interesting names that I do think could be discussed here, but I am kind of intrigued as to where that conversation is going to go. I don't think they would need a Savard. They had just signed Edmondson in the offseason after all. And Jordan Spence, Brandt Clark, they've been doing some very good things with that team. I don't know if that would really be a need of theirs. If you wanted to talk about interesting names from LA that I would like to see get acquired by Montreal, aside from, of course, the obvious Quinton Byfields, etc., I mean, anybody thinking about Philippe Deneau? Okay, no, just kidding. I'm joking about that. And then Edmonton, of course, there is the David Savard conversation that we have been talking about a bunch of times. They do need some extra defense. They do need to replace Philip Broberg and Cody Ceci and their roles on the squad. Unfortunately, Ty Emberson, Troy Stetcher, and Travis Dermott aren't necessarily the best guys to fit the bill. But aside from that, of course, I mean, those are just some basic overview conversations about either of these teams. If you're a Montreal Canadiens fan, I want you to let me know your thoughts. If you're making a trade with Anaheim, LA, Pittsburgh, or Edmonton, what is it that you would want in exchange for whatever it is that you're moving out? I get it, that's kind of a stupid question because it's like, hey, how could I evaluate the return if I don't know what I'm giving up? If I want Edmonton assets, yeah, give me Connor McDavid. Like, of course, that's not going to happen. But realistically, when you consider some of the trade ideas that have been floated out there, do you think the Montreal Canadiens could be targeting some middle tier, let's say top of the line young guys who have themselves some significant potential long term? If you think about the LA Kings, I think about those defensemen, Brandt Clark, Jordan Spence, they're great. Quinton Byfield, of course, is an awesome young forward. Don't know if the Canadiens have the assets to pry away any of those dudes, though, and what is it that would actually make that trade go through? Who really knows? Edmonton, it's a lot more understandable for them. They're trying to contend. They have their window right now. They would be in a spot to trade away some prospects if they needed to in order to get themselves a Savard or something else like that. If you wanted to get a first-round pick from Edmonton, it would probably be a pretty high pick, honestly. I don't really want to clown too hard on the Oilers, even though I know it's in my nature and my Vancouver-raised blood to do so. From the Anaheim Ducks, they're interesting because obviously Trevor Zegras is the main piece that everybody talks about. However, I'm not really too sure if that trade idea is still all too valid at this point in the year. And then in Pittsburgh, I mean, what? They have some prospects, they have some draft picks, but they've been really starting to pile up ever since that Michael Bunting trade. It's just that Michael Bunting trade was a few months ago, and we still have to see Pittsburgh see throughout that Sidney Crosby's career ends off on a high note, and not in some sort of a rebuilding capacity. Or, heck, maybe even we talk about Sidney Crosby himself. That idea is obviously ridiculous, but ultimately it is something that I think has been talked about a few times, cough cough, especially on this YouTube channel. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about how the Montreal Canadiens trade talks have been linked with these teams. Anaheim, Pittsburgh, LA, Edmonton, what are your thoughts about the Canadiens making some sort of a trade? Let me know in the comment section below. The article will also be linked in the description box as well if you wanted to see that. There's a lot to go over, I'd say, and I think this video is just a very easy kind of holistic overview before we really dive into some of the deeper nitty-gritty stuff. I have to get my breath back, especially after almost dying this weekend whilst skiing around in Whistler. Yeah, I kind of had a really interesting weekend, if you couldn't already tell. Check out that vlog that we did as well if you wanted to get the full scoop as to how I almost passed away on the slopes. I'm a beginner in skiing, and I really need to learn how to stop, because just pizzaing down a blue path is definitely not the right way to do it. But thoughts in the comment section below about the Montreal Canadiens and their trade talks. I gotta go get some sleep before making even more videos later in I was about to say tomorrow. No, later in the afternoon, because I'm gonna really need to catch up on some of the other stuff that happened. But Canadiens trade talk, that's the stitch. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.